back on the Young Turks coverage of the 250th birthday, I suppose, anniversary of the United States Army, the military parade that accompanies it, brought to you by Donald Trump on his 79th birthday. And now joining us is Christian Sorensen. He's was with the U.S. Air Force, and he's one of the most foremost experts on studying military contracting, and that is certainly very relevant here. So, Christian, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, as we look at the parade, and we'll pull it back up here, we've seen a lot of military equipment go by, and we explained to the audience. It ranges from Revolutionary War all the way through the future army, Golden Dome and other pieces of nonsense. Tell us about some of what we're seeing. When we look at the equipment from the past, I just read the numbers on how much different wars cost and how the global war on terror costs so much more than World War I, Vietnam, and in fact twice as much as World War II, right? Mm-hmm. Is it mainly the equipment that costs more? What is it that costs more?
So there's a lot there. At the absolute base of it, the US military itself has no longer any real industrial capacity to produce a weapon of war or to produce any product or any technology that really has to do with war. Pretty much all of that, since the Vietnam War gradually has been shifted into corporate hands. So it's the corporations together that are calling the shots. They are the ones who set the price. They are the ones who control the two parties through lobbying and campaign finance and revolving door like you talked about. And so that's just the baseline. But the other thing is the war industry itself, the corporations that develop, market, and sell all this technology, they don't just sell some of which we see today, the rotary aircraft, the helicopters, the tanks, and the bombs and the missiles, what we kind of usually think about when it comes to war and preparations for war. They also sell everything else that you could possibly imagine that has to do with fighting or that has to do with preparations for fight. So that includes operating some of the bases, home and overseas. That's stuff that the troops used to do. The private used to, mow the lawn and take out the trash. That's pretty much now almost all in corporate hands at some of the larger bases. The corporations make espionage software. They do physical security at bases. They sell now these days artificial intelligence. You were talking earlier on the program about nuclear weapons. That is all in corporate hands, and on and on. So the system itself is all corporate, and the corporations are running the show, and that's sort of where a lot of the cost comes from. Not to mention what they sell after they get you on the hook. They don't just sell the product; they sell and they bill the military for everything from assembly to inspection to packaging to delivery to maintenance, upgrades, monitoring the actual product. It's all billable activities. So that's sort of the key to why, as your graphic showed, the wars these days, the nonstop wars, cost so much.
Well, yeah. Now the weapon systems that are being purchased are kind of so complex that the services themselves are not able to repair them. I mean, my understanding is that the F-35 needs to be flown back to Texas for the guy who built it, the contractor that built it, to repair it.
Yes, so the F-35 is made. The prime contractor on the F-35 is Lockheed Martin. And the main assembly plant is in Fort Worth, Texas, correct? But the Lockheed Martin also has a list of subcontractors, so other corporations that are involved in making the weapon of war. And so this gets to what another problem with the system these days is that the military, it doesn't just purchase the land vehicle or the aircraft or the submarine or whatever. Those are called, the platform. It doesn't just purchase the platform. It purchases many other products and categories of service that we talked about that go on the platform. So if you have like, a Black Hawk helicopter, for example, that when we see that in the parade today, you have the helicopter itself, which is made by Lockheed Martin's subsidiary Sikorsky. So you have that. Then you have a different corporation that will sell the weaponry, a different corporation that sells the information technology, a different corporation on vision and cameras and equipment and all that, a different one for the communication gear, and on and on and on and on. And so you mentioned Lockheed Martin F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. A big key to that is, yes, Lockheed Martin, the corporation itself, is in charge of a lot of the maintenance. Lockheed Martin also sells the maintenance sort of monitoring system, and that itself is plagued with some problems, as the aircraft is notoriously plagued with some problems. And so, yeah, another problem with the F-35 is that Lockheed Martin, when inking the contract early on with the representatives in the Pentagon, very wisely from a business perspective, but very horribly from a quote unquote national security perspective, made sure that it was in charge of a lot of the data that the aircraft collects and a lot of the data that has to do with maintenance and sustainment. So you have the F-35 these days that doesn't keep up with minimum maintenance standards because of lack of spare parts and lack of the technical data, which the corporation pretty much owns and has a lock on and is very hesitant to release because that would cut into their bottom line.
So I want to ask you about the two things you mentioned there, the F-35, and then actually as it relates to the technology and how they kind of lord that over us, the corporate defense contractors do. But as we're watching this parade, two thoughts popped into my head. One, it was earlier, I believe we were looking at the Bradley fighting vehicles. We told you there's 28 of them in the parade. There's some Abrams tanks as well, but I think there was the Bradley fighting vehicles that were going by earlier. And you'll see the helicopters in there as well. We told you about the Apaches and the Black Hawk helicopters. And then guys, is to Colonel Wilkerson's point earlier. So before I get back to the F-35, Ben, as I look at this parade, now there's a drone in the air. And those drones, by the way, could change war fighting completely, which I want to come back to with Christian in a little bit as well. But as I saw the military marching through the streets of Washington, Ben, especially with what Larry said in the last segment, it felt a little haunting, like they're almost getting us ready for an internal occupation.
Yeah, it does look kind of ugly in that respect when you put it together with what's going on now in Los Angeles and Trump calling out the military on American citizens that are exercising their right to protest. Yeah, that has me pretty scared. I mean, that's the scariest thing.
Yeah, because it's one thing when he had planned to do this parade. Oh, it's my birthday, and I want to have some toys and some soldiers, and maybe, other circus, a clown. I don't know what he wanted for his birthday, right? But now when you have actual not only National Guard but Marines in the streets of LA, well, now this just got real. That's not a parade, that's the actual military in the streets of American cities. And this wasn't what America was supposed to be. So Christian, then back to you on the F-35. I mean, there's a reason why we're seeing this. Is this the Bradley fighting vehicle?
I can't see, that looks like, it depends on how big from my angle, it looks like it could be, yeah. It's either the Bradley or it's the Bradley. The Paladin, so Bradley is made by BAE Systems. And the Paladin howitzer, which has a bigger, basically artillery on the front. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so that's the Bradley fighting vehicle right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it amazed me that they're actually putting the Bradley in this parade, because the Bradley is kind of like the poster child for the corrupted acquisition and testing process. I mean, it was so sick that a book was written on it called The Pentagon Wars. It was made into a movie with Kelsey Grammer that's called a black comedy. I mean, I thought it was a tragedy. I mean, what they pointed out was that, standard operating procedure was to fudge the tests. I mean, this was a vehicle that was designed to transport troops and to protect them, and the damn thing was made out of aluminum. And the guy who had formerly been in charge of doing the testing and development refused to test it with live fire. And then another guy came in and said, "That's crazy. Of course we should test it with live fire." They tested it with live fire, and it was clear that if there was live fire, whoever was in it would have died. But that guy who uncovered all the problems, he didn't get promoted, and the guy who created the problems did.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the point that Larry was making, Ben's making, Christian's making, which is that the point here isn't to have the world's greatest military, and it's certainly not to protect and defend the homeland. It's to do aggressive imperial wars, and protecting the troops is one of the last priorities. It's a boondoggle of how much can you spend, because the money you spend goes directly to these private corporation defense contractors. That's why, if you remember, in the beginning of the Iraq War, all of our vehicles were getting blown up, and they were not properly protected, and the IEDs were getting our soldiers killed and our troops killed more than anything else was. And then Rumsfeld arrogantly went to Iraq and said, "Well, you go to fight with the army you have, not the one you wish you had," right? Well, yeah, that's because you guys wasted all of the money on purpose on junk that doesn't work and didn't even think to protect the troops. And so, all right, speaking of wasting money, that leads us perfectly back to the F-35. How much money have we spent as US taxpayers on the F-35?
Oh, to date, that's very difficult. I wouldn't have that figure. And I actually would challenge anyone in the Pentagon to come up with that figure. The overall estimated program cost for the F-35 is upwards of $1.6 trillion. But I don't know how much of that has been allocated, and I don't know how much of that is still sort of in the works. But I will say this: I will say that there are two sort of phases of acquisition when it comes to a major weapons acquisition program, whether it's an aircraft, a sub, an aircraft carrier, whatever. For the F-35, so then those two phases are initial production and full rate production. And so the F-35 for many years was in initial production. And that basically says, all right, we're not going to, commit to buying full speed at this stage. And the corporation gradually applies pressure through a variety of ways, some of which Larry talked about. And the Pentagon finally said, all right, we're gonna switch to from slow rate initial production to full rate production. And the justification of that was not made public, contrary to basically standard operating procedure. Usually it's not a classified document. It's usually wide in the open. You can find it. If you're a journalist, you can get it. If you are in the Pentagon, you can issue it to the public. And so we don't know what the justification was to take an aircraft that has flaw after flaw after flaw and upgrade it to, we'll go full steam in. We're all in on this aircraft. So it's just another thing where classification is overused and used not just to protect confidential, secret, top secret, but it's also there to protect corporate greed, fraud, waste, and abuse, et cetera.
Yeah, we're seeing these robots that are part of the modern warfare, apparently. Do you know what these are, Christian, out of curiosity?
No, that looks like something that maybe Boston Dynamics would have done, but I'm not up on that at all.
The music obviously is coming from the parade.
Let's hope those dogs are not autonomous.
Yeah, which is a whole nother problem. So it does not even get into that problem. So Christian, 1.6 trillion, I've seen the number 1.7 trillion for the F-35. Now, I'm not a military expert at all in terms of the equipment. So did the F-35 at least turn out to be a great plane? Do we use it all the time? It hasn't been useful?
No, so give credit where credit's due. One of the things that the F-35 actually does somewhat well is it's basically a flying computer. It's very good at networking with other aircraft that are in the air and sort of seeing what's out there. So credit where credit's due. What it is not good at is some of the major things that the corporation, when it was initially pitching this aircraft, marketed as having. So for example, it was marketed as a stealth aircraft, but to be stealth, you have to have a very low signature when other countries are looking for you on the radar. And so one of the things you do is put on a highly classified mixture on the aircraft's outer layer, and this is sort of a quote unquote stealth coating. Well, there's some reporting on that where it's like it's not as stealth as it was marketed as. Also, you can't be stealth if you have a lot of weaponry on the, hanging under the aircraft wings. And so the corporation said, all right, we'll carry it inside. But the engine on the F-35 is so big that it can't carry a lot of the weaponry on the inside. So later on, the Pentagon was like, all right, we'll carry it on the outside. We'll carry the bombs and the missiles and everything on the outside. Well, then that eliminates a lot of your stealth ability. So that's another problem. It also has a General Dynamics rotary cannon on the front of a couple of different variants of the aircraft. And the cannon has reportedly blown up at various times on its own, shot itself, basically had problems with that. It also has a Raytheon Pratt & Whitney engine, and the engine has had serious problems with vibrations. And the vibrations, if they get bad enough, can cause basically catastrophic failure of the aircraft. And as we mentioned earlier, it doesn't have enough spare parts, and so there's trouble with maintenance, and it does not meet, I believe to this day, at least as of last season when I checked last on the maintenance standards, it doesn't meet minimum US military maintenance standards because of lack of spare parts and not enough access to the corporate data. So no, it's not.
And so, and my understanding is that the thing is not mission capable at least 50% of the time.
Yeah, I saw a number. There's a really good reporter for Bloomberg, I believe, called Anthony Capaccio. I'm probably bungling his last name, but he's done really good work on the F-35 reporting for Bloomberg. And I believe the number he cited was even lower than 50%. It was something like high 30s, mid 40s. So yeah, and so the Pentagon, the people who are left in the high ranks of the Pentagon, who, the few that actually have, a soul left are, justifiably furious. But one of the problems with the revolving door is there's so many political appointees from the corrupt two-party system there, they don't care. And then there's the actual revolving door itself, where people from industry go into government, go back to industry, go into government. And so they themselves are just looking to profit financially and professionally. So nobody who's actually in a position to change this whole monstrosity is gonna do anything.
Well, and the thing that drives me crazy is I follow what's going on with the F-35, and it's exactly what happened with the F-22, the previous plane. They all go through the same stages. First, it's overpromise in terms of what the thing is capable of doing. Then it's lowball the price, and then it's get it politically engineered so that parts of it are made in every congressional district, and then you can't stop it, despite the fact that it doesn't meet the original performance specifications. It costs way more than it should, and the damn thing is unreliable. So eventually, Congress cuts off the money for it. And that's what they did with the F-22. And the F-35 is just following in the same exact steps. And I hear there's even talk now about cutting production on the F-35. And, based on past performance, it doesn't look like the F-47 is going to be any better. Hey, I was wondering, Christian, is the F-47 the plane that they said we can't tell you how much it's going to cost because it's classified, national security, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I haven't seen any figures for the total cost of the F-47, but it's still in its basically digital design phase at this point. But there are plenty of overpriced and underperforming weapons, like the new Northrop Grumman B-21 bomber, and that's
yeah. I mean, what drives me crazy? Well, there's so many things that drive me crazy. Is that you could use proven technology on these planes. I mean, you could use stuff that's tried and true. I mean, you'd think in a war environment, you wouldn't want to buy the first model off the line. But that's what they insist on doing because, as you all said, it's driven by profits.
Yeah, Christian, real quick, I've got to ask you two questions before we let you go. So let's note for the record that it is startling that we could spend $1.6 trillion on a piece of equipment and then not have spare parts on it. Jesus, where'd the money go? I mean, how do you not have money for spare parts if you spent 1.6 trillion and it doesn't work apparently about 60% of the time? I mean, it doesn't get any more boondoggle than this. But I was led to believe that Doge was going to clean up all this waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you suggesting that it hasn't, Christian?
Yes, and many people are suggesting that it hasn't. There's so much money to be made in war, and one of the big reasons is the people who benefit, the 1%, the ruling class, the richest of the rich, are not the ones who sacrifice. It's the working class. It's the 99% who pay all the costs. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And then finally, you mentioned how we're kind of beholden to these corporations who have the data on some of these pieces of equipment and the technology, et cetera. So we're actually living under corporate military rule in a sense as well. And I saw a report on Golden Dome where they said that they were going to, Elon was planning, if he got the contract, to not only charge us money for Golden Dome, but to make it a subscription service so that we would have to keep paying him monthly. And then I thought, well, what if we don't? Does he then take Golden Dome to China or Russia or somewhere else, or whoever's the highest bidder? Is that possible? And what does it mean to do a subscription service for the US military?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. It is though indicative of the sort of the psychosis or the pathology of the ruling class, and how money is the ultimate goal, and they will do anything in order to keep the game going, even if it's life or death.
Well, they should sell it to some country that we're concerned about because it doesn't work.
Well, that's an ironic way to screw over our enemies. Oh yeah, that you not only take our weapons that don't work, but take our defense contractors, and you get bankrupted instead of us. Yeah. But I don't know that we'll utilize that unique strategy that Ben just came up with. But Christian Sorensen, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.